Welcome to the DiscipleSmith's podcast. We're continuing our study through the entire Bible in 1 year. Today we're covering Exodus chapters 11 through 13 in part 19 of our series. Thank you for tuning in. This is the DiscipleSmith's podcast. Welcome back to the DiscipleSmith's podcast. We're going through the entire Bible in 1 year, and we're just kind of breaking it apart day by day, looking at these. Just a few chapters at a time. I'm just going to be reading straight from the Bible, and then at the end of the video, I'll just give a brief commentary, nothing too in-depth or spectacular. It's just a way to get through the entire Bible in 1 year, just to make it easier for you to access that. And so I appreciate you tuning in. We're going to get right into it. We are going through Exodus chapters 11 through 13, and I'm going to be in the Holman Christian Standard Version of the Bible for anybody who would like to follow along. So we've already talked about the other 9 plagues. God is trying to get his people, the Israelites, out of slavery in Egypt. God had planned this for hundreds of years before that when he told Abraham that he was going to deliver his descendants from slavery in Egypt. And so this is God fulfilling his promise. God knows exactly what's going to happen. God knows Pharaoh's intentions, and God knows what Pharaoh is going to do in certain situations. So God has hardened Pharaoh's heart several times through some of the plagues and things that have came about already. So we're getting ready to get into the most extreme, the 10th plague. This is where we get the Passover that Jewish people still celebrate to this day. It's something that Jesus celebrated during his day. And so here we go. Chapter 11, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will drive you out of here. Now announce to the people that both men and women should ask their neighbors for silver and gold jewelry. The Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and the man Moses was highly regarded in the land of Egypt by Pharaoh's officials and the people. So Moses said, This is what Yahweh says. About midnight I will go throughout Egypt, and every firstborn male in the land of Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, to the firstborn of the servant girl who is behind the millstones, as well as every firstborn of the livestock. Then there will be a great cry of anguish through all the land of Egypt, such as never was before, or ever will be again. But against all the Israelites, whether man or beast, not even a dog will snarl, so that you may know that Yahweh makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. All these officials of yours will come down to me and bow before me, saying, Leave, you and all the people who follow you. After that, I will leave. And he left Pharaoh's presence in fierce anger. The Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh will not listen to you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go out of his land. Chapter 12. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, This month is to be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month they must each select an animal of the flock according to their father's households, 1 animal per household. If the household is too small for a whole animal, that person and the neighbor nearest his house are to select one based on the combined number of people. You should apportion the animal according to what each person will eat. You must have an unblemished animal, a year-old male. You may take it from either the sheep or the goats. You are to keep it until the 14th day of this month. Then the whole assembly of the community of Israel will slaughter the animals at twilight. They must take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses where they eat them. They are to eat the meat that night. They should eat it roasted over the fire along with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or cooked in boiling water, but only roasted over fire, its head as well as its legs and inner organs. Do not let any of it remain until morning. You must burn up any part of it that does not remain before morning. Here is how you must eat it. You must be dressed for travel, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You are to eat it in a hurry. It is the Lord's Passover. I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night and strike every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. I am Yahweh. I will execute judgments against all the gods of Egypt. The blood on the houses where you are staying will be a distinguishing mark over you. When I see the blood, I will pass by over you. No plague will be among you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day is to be a memorial for you, and you must celebrate it as a festival to the Lord. You are to celebrate it throughout your generations as a permanent statute. You must eat unleavened bread for 7 days. On the first day you must remove yeast from your houses. Whoever eats what is leavened from the first day through the 7th day must be cut off from Israel. You are to hold a sacred assembly on the first day and another sacred assembly on the 7th day. No work may be done on those days except for preparing what you need to eat, and you may only do that. You are to observe the festival of unleavened bread because on this very day I brought your division out of the land of Egypt. You must observe this day throughout your generations as a permanent statute. You are to eat unleavened bread in the first month, from the evening of the 14th day of the month until the evening of the 21st day. Yeast must not be found in your houses for 7 days. If anyone eats something leavened, that person, whether a foreign resident or native of the land, must be cut off from the community of Israel. Do not eat anything leavened. Eat unleavened bread in all your homes. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, Go select an animal from the flock according to your families, and slaughter the Passover animal. Take a cluster of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and brush the lintel and the 2 doorposts with some of the blood in the basin. None of you may go out the door of his house until morning, when the Lord passes through to strike Egypt and sees the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts. He will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter your houses to strike you. Keep this command permanently as a statute for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you, as he promised, you are to observe this ritual. When your children ask you, What does this ritual mean to you? You are to reply, It is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord. For he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he struck the Egyptians and spared our homes. So the people bowed down and worshipped. Then the Israelites went and did this. They did just as the Lord had commanded Aaron and Moses. Now at midnight the Lord struck every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and every firstborn of the livestock. During the night Pharaoh got up, he along with all of his officials and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud wailing throughout Egypt because there wasn't a house without someone dead. He summoned Moses and Aaron during the night and said, Get up, leave my people, both you and the Israelites, and go, worship Yahweh as you have asked. Take even your flocks and your herds as you have asked, and leave, and also bless me. Now the Egyptians pressured the people in order to send them quickly out of the country, for they said, We are all going to die. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, and their kneading bowls wrapped up in their clothes and their shoulders. The Israelites acted on Moses' word and asked the Egyptians for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. And the Lord gave the people such favor in the Egyptians' sight that they gave them what they requested. In this way they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites traveled from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 soldiers on foot besides their families. An ethnically diverse crowd also went up with them, along with a huge number of livestock, both flocks and herds. The people baked the dough they had brought out of Egypt into unleavened loaves, since it had no yeast. For when they had been driven out of Egypt, they could not delay and had not prepared any provisions for themselves. The time that the Israelites lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, on that same day, all the Lord's divisions went out from the land of Egypt. It was a night of vigil in honor of the Lord, because he would bring them out of the land of Egypt. This same night is in honor of the Lord, a night vigil for all the Israelites throughout their generations. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, This is my statute over the Passover. No foreigner may eat it, but any slave a man has purchased may eat it, after you have circumcised him. A temporary resident or hired hand may not eat the Passover. It is to be eaten in one house. You may not take any of the meat outside the house, and you may not break any of its bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate it. If a foreigner resides with you and wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover, Every male in his household must be circumcised, and then he may participate. He will become like a native of the land, but no uncircumcised person may eat it. The same law will apply to both the native and the foreigner who resides among you." Then all the Israelites did this. They did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. On that same day the Lord brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt according to their divisions. Chapter 13. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Consecrate every firstborn male to me, the firstborn from every womb among the Israelites, both man and domesticated animal. It is mine." And the translation there, mine, is Corban, is what you may hear it in other translations. Then Moses said to the people, "Remember this day when you came out of Egypt, out of the people of slavery, for the Lord brought you out of here by the strength of his hand. Nothing leavened may be eaten. Today in the month of Abib you are leaving. When the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers that he would give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you must carry out this ritual in this month. For 7 days you must eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there is to be a festival to the Lord. Unleavened bread is to be eaten for those 7 days. Nothing leavened may be found among you, and no yeast may be found among you in all your territory. On that day explain to your son, 'This is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt.' Let it serve as a sign for you and on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead, so that the Lord's instruction may be in your mouth. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with a strong hand. Keep this statute as it is at its appointed time from year to year. When the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, to the Lord every firstborn male, you are to present to the Lord every firstborn male of the womb. All firstborn offspring of the livestock you own that are males will be the Lord's. You must redeem every firstborn of a donkey with a flock animal, but if you do not redeem it, break its neck. However, you must redeem every firstborn among your sons. In the future, when your son asks you, 'What does this mean?' say to him, 'By the strength of his hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of the man to the firstborn of livestock. That is why I sacrifice to the Lord all the firstborn of the womb that are males, but I redeem all the firstborn of my sons. So let it be a sign on your hand and a symbol on your forehead, for the Lord brought us out of Egypt by the strength of his hand.' When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them along the road to the land of the Philistines, even though it was nearby, for God said, 'The people will change their minds and return to Egypt if they face war.' So he led the people around toward the Red Sea along the road of the wilderness, and the Israelites left the land of Egypt in battle formation. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, because Joseph had made the Israelites swear a solemn oath, saying, 'God will certainly come to your aid, then you must take my bones with you from this place.' They set out from Succoth and camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to lead them on their way during the day, and a pillar of fire to give them light at night, so that they could travel day or night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night never left its place in front of the people." May God bless the reading of his word. May it shape and transform our minds and our hearts to better discern his will. All right, so a few things to talk about. These are some really difficult passages if you're just kind of reading through them. A few things to note. Throughout this, we see this very dramatic show of force, essentially, by the Lord God. He sends a destroyer out to kill the firstborn of all of the Egyptians. Now, some might accredit this as being an act of evil, as an act of evil. But what you have to understand is that God's foreknowledge, his ability to see past, present, future, and hypothetical situations, God can perfectly discern right from wrong in all situations. We don't have that authority. We're seeing things from a very small window. We're just seeing the death of the firstborn as this tragic incident, and it is tragic. because the sin of the people brought that upon them. But you have to understand that God is just in everything that he does. And sometimes I believe that he can bring about or allow a certain destruction or trial or tribulation, even in our own lives, especially in our own lives, where he will bring about a greater purpose in your life through that pain. I've experienced this in my own personal life. I used to be an atheist. The time that I looked up to God was whenever my wife and I were about to get a divorce. We had struggled through a lot, and I was just ready to give up. And at that moment, through the pain, through the trials, God really just brought me up from that. And he used that pain and that suffering. Was that his desire? Well, of course not. That's not his desire. His desire is that we come to him freely on our own. But our sin gets in the way of that. Our stubbornness gets in the way of that. Our pride gets in the way of that. And so sometimes God has to use a stronger hand to bring us up out of the bondage of sin. And that's a very important aspect of these few chapters. We get this preparation for the Passover meal that they're supposed to eat, and they're supposed to celebrate this every year. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's some deeper meaning, but we don't really have time to get into that. However, the Passover was you slaughter an animal and you wipe some of its blood on the doorposts, and this destroyer, whenever it sees the blood, will pass over the house instead of killing the firstborn of that household. Now they have all these different things to prepare for it, and that's what chapter 12 basically says. And then they get the Exodus, where Pharaoh finally lets them go, which is what God had instructed Moses and Aaron to say to him from the beginning, but his heart was hard, so he would not let the people go. Finally, just as God said, Pharaoh let the people go. And so they plundered the Egyptians. They didn't steal from them. They just asked them for things, and the Lord granted them favor, and they gave the Israelites a lot of wealth, which they will later be using in the tabernacle and things like that to set up God's temple. But in the meantime, the Israelites leave, and in chapter 13, it talks about when your sons come to ask you what this Passover meal means, this is what you are to say to them. You are to say, by the strength of his hand, the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Now, I want you to think about that in your own life. We are all slaves to sin whenever we're born. And through his strong, righteous right hand, God delivers us from that. He died on the cross for our sins. He is the sacrifice. Just like this Passover lamb was a sacrifice on behalf of the people, Jesus is that perfect sacrificial lamb. We no longer have to make these sacrifices like this because Jesus did it once for all on the cross. And whenever our sons and our daughters are old enough to approach us and say, Dad, why is it that, we go to church? Why is it that you sacrifice so much in your life to follow Jesus? And that's when you're to say, because son, daughter, I was once a slave, and God delivered me by his righteous right hand out of that slavery through the sacrifice of his son. And so these few precious chapters here are a foreshadowing of things to come whenever Jesus arrives and makes that sacrifice. And so the Passover is so important. If you remember when Jesus was given up, it was on the start of the Passover. And that's why the Jewish people were so quick to crucify him and then get them down from the cross, because they needed to do that before the Passover started, because they couldn't do any work during that time. And so a sobering few chapters, hopefully some thought-provoking chapters. If you've never surrendered to the Lord Jesus, why not? I would love to be able to answer any questions that you may have, but I do want to say I appreciate you tuning in, and this has been the DiscipleSmith's podcast. My name is Kevin. We will see you on the next episode.